What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today I wanted to talk about sliding in Black Ops 6, because if you guys remember from the Season 2 patch notes, Treyarch actually mentioned that they are continuing to monitor on-new movement feedback, and they're currently testing slight reductions to initial slide speed and duration to improve predictability of engagements when opponents enter with a slide. So it looks like based on this, there's a decent chance that we are going to be seeing a nerf to the slide in this game, at least a slight one, and I just wanted to explore this topic a little bit more to see if this is something that could potentially improve the game, or if this nerf would actually be a mistake. So as I usually like to do with topics like this, let's explore both sides and then I'll share my opinions on this. And let's start this off with the current issues, or at least perceived issues, with sliding in Black Ops 6. Why would some people, including developers apparently, potentially want sliding to be nerfed? Well, as it is right now in the game's current state, sliding is extremely effective in most situations if you're aggressively challenging enemies, especially when coming around a corner. In fact, I would say it's by far the most effective method. You'll see me sliding in my gameplays almost all the time. It kind of depends on the gun that I'm using and how I'm playing, but more often than not, I'm sliding into engagements whenever I can make it happen. And this can honestly get quite repetitive, just constantly sliding around and into every single fight. But at the end of the day, if that's the most effective way to be playing, then people are going to do it and they're going to take advantage of it. Why wouldn't you if that's going to give you your best odds possible of winning the next fight? And one problem that comes with that is, like I said, it's just repetitive. And also, I do think it takes a little bit away from the decision making in the game as well. Because when I'm thinking about challenging somebody around a corner, I'm not thinking, what's best in this situation right now? Should I jump shot this? Should I slide this? Should I just strafe around this corner? No, the answer 99% of the times is I should be sliding around this corner. Additionally, on the flip side of this, from the enemy's perspective, when done properly, it can be very jarring and frustrating to try to track a player that just instantly drops down below your aim and they move at an inhuman pace. And then on top of this, if they're doing it around a corner, it can also be used to quote-unquote break cameras. That's a term that's used in the community often. Essentially, this is talking about exploiting peeker's advantage. And just a quick recap of that for anybody that may be unaware of what peeker's advantage is, this is something that's inherently going to exist in any online FPS game, especially online, and especially if you're dealing with higher latency values. But essentially the way this works is as you're coming around a corner, you're essentially always going to be able to see the enemy player before they see you. And this is just due to the delays that exist in an online environment, because as you're coming around the corner, you get to see what's currently around that corner. But the information that you are traveling around that corner hasn't reached the enemy player yet. It takes a little bit of time for that data to be transmitted, and therefore for their screen to display the fact that you're there. This is what peeker's advantage is. It can be mitigated to a degree with various methods like extrapolation, for instance, but there's always going to be at least some there, especially in the higher latency values. Now, this isn't usually massive. It's not like you get a full half-second advantage over them. We're talking like a small handful of frames, if anything, but it's still there and it's still a very real advantage. And while it can potentially result in situations where you're receiving damage before that enemy is even visible on your screen, more often than not, it's not that extreme, but it will look like that player has an inhuman reaction time from your perspective, because they're able to get damage on you literally the frame that they're visible on your screen, and that shouldn't be possible. Nobody can react that fast. And with the way this works, the faster you're able to move, the more extreme the peeker's advantage is going to appear. And with sliding in this game, you can move very, very quickly. That initial acceleration especially is insane. And as you can see in this example, where we both have a fairly low ping to the server, about 20 to 25 milliseconds on both ends, I actually get hit and take damage on the exact frame where that player's head becomes visible. And when you factor in the average human reaction time, it's just not really possible to counteract that unless that person ends up missing a bunch of shots, and then maybe you can shoot back and do something. And I think this right here is the best argument in favor of nerfing slides a little bit, especially with that initial speed and acceleration like they outlined. Now, on the other side of that, there's the argument of skill gap, and I totally get it. It does take a certain level of skill and mastery to consistently get that timing and your slide control just right as you're approaching corners. It's not like the hardest skill ever to master, but you can see a very big gap between a really good player that slides into gunfights a lot versus an average to below average player that probably isn't even going to be sliding at all. So there's absolutely a skill gap that exists when it comes to this. But in my eyes, the skill gap argument starts to fall apart a little bit when we're talking about essentially heavily exploiting the limitations of the game, which in this case is heavily exploiting peeker's advantage. And for me, I like a healthy skill gap. I'm often one of the people that will be pushing for more of a skill gap in various areas. However, to me, a healthy skill gap means that there's counterplay. And like I showed, when we're talking about peeker's advantage, and again, keep in mind, it can get noticeably worse than what I showed as well as you're dealing with higher latency values. in an online environment, there often really isn't much viable counterplay to somebody that's effectively sliding and challenging you around a corner. If somebody does it just right, there's basically nothing you can do to stop it. You're just dead. So as a result, when it comes to this topic, as much as I take advantage of sliding, and I'm on the giving end of this far more than I'm ever on the receiving end, I've gotten so many kills while sliding around corners. At the end of the day, I do think it's probably healthy for the game overall if they were to very, very slightly tone this back. Now, I want to be clear, I don't want them to destroy sliding by any means. I still want it to be an effective method of playing the game and aggressively challenging people to a degree. I just think if they slightly tone back that initial speed like they're currently testing, that could potentially be healthy for the game overall. Now, in saying this, I think there's also a risk attached to this. Anytime you slow down movement or take movement away from players, that's always going to result in some pushback from the people that take advantage of that heavily, because to them, the game is now going to feel immediately worse. It's going to feel like something was taken away from them because you are taking something away from them. On the flip side of that, I think it's really easy to add movement options and improve the speed and fluidity of movement. That receives a lot less pushback, but taking it away, that's a different story. So I'm curious to see how this is handled, assuming they do go through with this nerf to sliding. They may just accept the fact that there's going to be pushback against this and push the nerf through anyway. Or perhaps we could see some kind of a compromise here. If they're going to be nerfing sliding a little bit, maybe make jump shots a little bit more effective than they currently are. Maybe allow players to maintain a slight amount of momentum for a single bunny hop after landing off of a jump, for instance. Or maybe give a very slight boost to stray speeds across the board for all of the guns in the game. That way, you're taking a little bit away from sliding, but you're adding in other areas, which would then provide some more viable options and therefore potentially create some gameplay variety as well. So going into a gunfight, you maybe do want to think, should I slide here? Should I jump here? Should I just strafe here? And the answer won't necessarily always be, yeah, I should just slide. Because currently, like I said, that's what the best option is in nearly every single situation. So those are my thoughts on this. I'm not necessarily here to push for a nerf to sliding. If they change nothing with this, I'm totally fine with that. Like I said, I'm on the winning end of this way more than I'm on the losing end, so it's not going to hurt me in any way if they don't change sliding. But at the end of the day, I do think for the overall health of the game and the majority of the player base, a very, very slight nerf to sliding could potentially be beneficial overall, and I'm not necessarily opposed to it. Also, of course, at the end of the day, sliding is far from the biggest issue in this game right now, and there are other improvements that I think would have a much larger positive impact on the game. But just because there are bigger things to handle, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be exploring adjustments like this that could potentially have a positive impact on the game. Now, of course, this is where I'm curious to hear from you guys in those comments down below. How would you feel about a very slight nerf to the slide in Black Ops 6? Do you guys think this would be overall healthy for the game? Do you think it would be a good thing or not? Do you think this would be terrible? Do you think this would be a really bad idea to nerf sliding in any way? Just let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.